Welcome to Helping Organisations Thrive, and it's great to have Katie Maycock on the show. Good afternoon to you, Katie.
Hello, I've just recognized that I look so whited out. So if you're listening to this, go look at the video because it's so sunny that I look so white.
Actually, it's just turned, doesn't it? It was fine before. It's just that the
I
sun.
know.
Yes, I just noticed it now myself. That's fine. But yes, good to have you on the show. And just going to tell you, to the audience, a little bit about you. You are the founder of Get Your Shit Together, amongst other things, and you help high achievers, top performers, perfectionists take back control of the stress that allows them to live a sustainable, successful life. And so today we're going to be exploring, which is something about what you do a lot about as well, how to protect leaders from burnout in 2024. But before we get into that, Katie, I'd like to ask you, what do you love about what you do?
There's so much about what I love to do, but I really love when I get to work one-on-one with my clients. So I do a couple of different things, but I love working one-on-one with clients when they start to have those epiphanies of, oh my gosh, I've been living my life this way, which is using stress as a fuel, using, constantly putting themselves under 100% pressure and never giving themselves a break, feeling like they always have to be on the go to be successful, to recognize that there's a different way. And then just seeing those epiphanies and those changes that happen over time, which is so nice. When I see my clients get more confident, when I see them get a little bit more relaxed, being able to deal with problems more effectively, I just love that part. Like that part that's just what I love to do. And actually also a big part of what I do is making sure that people don't get sick from stress, which is a huge issue. And so when I start seeing people with chronic health issues and they start to go away and they start living a healthier, happier life, like it's just amazing. So I love that part.
It sounds very rewarding, but also you sound incredibly passionate about it. And I love when people are really passionate about a topic and what they do in their job. And we're going to be exploring this whole piece on burnout and how to protect leaders, how to almost prevent the burnout. And I'd like to ask you, what are the, I suppose, key factors that contribute a leader to burnout in the sort of current landscape that we operate in? And how do you see these factors evolving in 2024?
So a big thing about burnout is it does come from prolonged stress. So what I'm seeing from leaders and how they're burning out, and I do actually think that 2023 and 2024 has been a big shift on leaders burning out, which is there's huge reasons behind it. First things first, you've got to think about how this has sort of kind of evolved over the last few years. There's a lot more pressure on leadership teams. There's a lot, we've been in a recession, so they've had to potentially lay off people, or they've got more difficult demands on them. They've got higher targets. They've got higher deadlines that they then have to filter that onto their team. And that's really, really stressful. But then they're getting pushed back from the top down, and then they're getting pushed back from the people that they're employing, whether their team's already burnt out, if they're struggling to hit the targets, they're stressed out. There's a whole element there as well. Then you just take in the human element that right now that it's really stressful. It can be really stressful in the world right now. So to put that into consideration, there's a lot of reasons and there's a lot of aspects that go into leaders burning out. But if I think about just from COVID times, it was kind of scramble to make sure that the business doesn't fail, which is all on the leaders. They're there to drive the business. They're there to drive the culture. They're there to drive sales if they're a sales leader. They're there to make sure that their teams are effective. And a lot of the times they forget to take care of themselves. So it's really becoming that juggling act of how can I be a human being in this role when I'm getting pulled from all different ways within the business. So they have so many hats on, and you just think 2020, they had to pivot that. Then after that, then it was the recovery of burnout. So getting the businesses back to where they were, making sure that they're readjusting to the new climate. And then you've got a recession that hits as well. So it's just been constant for leaders right now, constantly having to pivot, constantly having to take care of their staff, constantly trying to have to manage cultures, the business strategies, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because obviously burnout comes through prolonged stress. And if you think of the last 4 years, we've had some pretty stressful sort of moments in our lives with pandemic, wars, Middle East, Ukraine, recession, cost of living crisis and, a whole host of stuff, hybrid working, remote working, navigating all that. And that still continues to be quite stressful. And as you say, businesses still want to keep growing, keep delivering, meeting the sort of profit targets. And there's obviously people being laid off and everything else. If you're a reader right now, and you're listening to this and you're thinking, am I burnt out? Am I just stressed, overstressed? What are the sort of early signs to sort of help people think, actually, this could be heading towards a burnout? Or what could the signs watch in their team in terms of their staff, and almost what are the signs to look for that actually could help them almost be proactive and try and prevent those as well?
Yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the 6 stages to burnout, because they have all different signs and symptoms, which I think would be really, really helpful for people to know. So I always say burnout's a destination. There's a journey that precedes it. So I'll walk you through the journey right now. So stage 1, which always everyone's a bit surprised by, which is excitement. So if you're a leader and you're listening to this, I want you to think about when you first became a leader, or a time in your life when you took on a new project, a new challenge, whatever it is. You're probably really excited by that. And physically, you're feeling really good. Emotionally, you're just really excited. Mentally, you're on fire. You can focus. Everything's really, really good. Now, what happens at stage 1 is that you probably develop bad habits. So we're looking at maybe you're sacrificing your sleep to get more stuff done. Maybe you're taking less downtime. You're probably working what I call passive working, which we're all probably guilty of it, where we check our phones in the morning, look at an email before we've even gotten out of bed and started our day. You go to bed at night, you're looking at your emails, all that kind of stuff. So you're passively working for longer periods of time, which is an issue for everyone. I do understand that. But you also
just on that passive working, why is that unhelpful? I'm not actually stating the other, but what is going on in our brains from a neuroscience point of view, physiological point of view? Why is it unhelpful to check your email before you wake up, as you wake up on an evening at night? Why is that not very good for you?
So what's happening is that we've got a conscious brain and a subconscious brain. So our brain is constantly having to filter through all the information that we pop into our brains, whatever we're reading. So even if we're passively scrolling through LinkedIn, Instagram, whatever it is, newspapers, anything like that, our brain still has to filter that information to know, actually, is this important? Is it not important? So that's one element. We're just putting more mental strain on our brains. We're not giving it the ability to sort of have that space to sort of decompress and sort of process less information. The second thing is that even we might read an email. I'm sure we're all guilty of it. We've read an email and you go, I really don't have time to write back to that right now. I'll write back to that when I get to my desk, whatever it is. But you're constantly thinking about it. Even if it's in the background, you're constantly thinking about that email. So you're actively working, and then you start thinking about all the things that you've got to do. And the reason why that's bad is because you're not giving space for you. You're not giving space for you to go, actually, what do I need? How am I feeling? What's going on emotionally for me? What do my family needs? Like, you're taking away time from yourself and from the people around you. That is really, really important. If we think about what makes us us and why we're human beings, is that we do need connection. We do need to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves. We're not robots. We do need time and space. And the last 20, 30 years since technology sort of came in, we did have a pretty hard boundary between work and home life. Now we don't. It's now very blurred. And the dilemma and that's probably the reason why we're seeing huge amounts of burnout increasing across the board. It's no longer just these high-flying jobs. It's no longer, the type A professionals that are burning out. Back in the 1976, when burnout was originally coined by a guy called Dr. Herbert Freudenberger, he was saying, there was a small portion of the population burning out, men getting heart attacks, all that kind of stuff, right? We think about that era. That's gone. We're now seeing people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s all burning out. It's no longer sort of like that specific small area. And I do think that it's the amount that we're putting into work, whether it's active work or passive work. I think it's a huge issue.
Okay, so that's the stage 1. So I interrupted.
That's okay. It's a good question.
No, because I think sometimes we sort of gloss over things, and we sometimes always assume or think everybody knows why that is an issue. And I think it's a big issue, because we all do it quite easily.
Yeah.
In the morning, we just grab our phones, and in the evenings we look at them, and and I'm increasingly less doing that. But I think it's a huge issue on in every generation at the moment right now. You know, people just constantly on go all the time,
Yeah.
isn't it?
It's a massive issue, and I think that's, and you got to think about it from a leader's perspective as well. They're taking care of a team of people underneath them, so they might be getting messages from team members, so, like, you know, people that are working underneath them, getting emails from the, you know, from the people above them. So there's a whole reason why people are more inclined to check their emails, but we need to really create that space so we can check in with ourselves. But going back to stage one, so you're not giving yourself that downtime. You might be sacrificing things like going to the gym, eating healthy, all these things that are really, really important to make sure that you're mitigating the impact of stress on your physical, mental, and emotional well-being. You kind of throw that out the window, but you're still functioning. So that's stage one. After a while, you then slip into stage two. So what happens is the excitement kind of wears off, but you've probably achieved really good goals in stage one. So you're probably performing at a high level and you're trying to maintain that high level, but you've created that, you know, that high level from unsustainable habits. And so you're physically, mentally, and emotionally just having to work a bit harder to achieve the same results. So you're still achieving, but it's coming at more of a physical, mental, and emotional toll. No one else is really going to notice, and nothing that, you know, a cup of tea or a coffee couldn't really fix. But at the end of the day, your concentration's just starting to wane. You might be making really tiny mistakes that are really easy to fix. Nothing crazy. Like I said, no one on the outside's recognizing anything's wrong. Then what happens is you slip into stage three. And this is when things start to sort of, you start seeing the cracks form at this stage. And people outside are going to recognize something's a little bit off. And this is what we
What sort of things would they be recognizing? What should we look for in our
That's
team?
I was just about to get into that. Yeah. So
Sorry, Katie. I'm
don't
just,
stress. No, it's fine. One of the big things is behavioral changes that you might see within yourself or the people that are reporting to you. So the behavioral changes that we can think about is, you know, maybe you've gone from being cool, calm, and collected to being a bit more frustrated or easier to anger, a bit more aggressive than you used to be. So it's that sort of having lack of patience is probably a polite way to say it, but you're finding that you're a bit more frustrated. You also might have been somebody that was very engaged, very bubbly, very outgoing, very, you know, always the first in, last out, all that kind of, always offering information to people, always being the one that's driving conversations, things like that, to start withdrawing, to not really want to be engaging with the people around you. And this can happen at work and at home, by the way. And I do find with leaders, this is more of an outside work issue where you start withdrawing from more of the family time, spending time with friends, things like that, just because you're potentially working, but you're also just sort of, you just have nothing to give to those people because you've given it all at work. So you start to withdraw. Physically, though, you're feeling quite tired. So you might be feeling like you're waking up very, very tired, but going to bed feeling wired. That's a really typical symptom at this stage as well. And emotionally, like we've already said, the behavioral changes with that. So a bit more angry, a bit more withdrawn, all that kind of stuff. But mentally as well, what's going on at this stage, and we're talking like cognition. We're not talking like mental health at this stage. We're talking cognition, which is you might just be lacking focus and lacking concentration, and you're going to notice that your performance is going to start to dip. So that's what I also mean by the people outside are really going to start noticing. Then what happens is you then slip into what I call anxiety and illness. So here's a massive, massive thing. And I think everyone knows this, but I feel like everyone doesn't understand it until it happens to you. But stress has a profound impact on your physical well-being. It reduces your immunity. It reduces your ability to digest food, which has a huge array of issues. So lower energy, gut health issues, allergies, intolerances, other inflammatory issues as well. But it also dysregulates your inflammatory system. And what that means is your body starts to become more inflamed in parts of the body that it didn't typically used to do that for that to happen. So you might be just generally feeling unwell, or you might be finding that your joints are swollen. You might have skin irritations. This is when people start to have flare-ups of autoimmune diseases. You know, there's so many other inflammatory issues that are going on at this stage that we're seeing. You've also got to understand.
And is this the prolonged stress that is causing this now? And prolonged, what time span are we looking at on this?
It's so hard to give just one answer for every single person. For some people, it might be like 3-4 months. For others, it might be 5 years. So it's really dependent on the stress and how prolonged it is. Let's say you take a really stressful situation and put that person in a prolonged period of time. So let's say an example, let's use a work example. Let's say the business is in dire straits, right? You need to be bringing money in, but you're under that stress for 3 months or something like that. You're probably going to see those issues in that situation, but you might be on the other side, you might just be having this chronic stress that might not be intense, but it's still chronic. So it might take 5 years and it might be a slow progress to get there. And that's something that's why it's really hard to answer that question.
Because I think there's been a lot of chronic stress since the pandemic, isn't it?
Yes.
I think
and that's why it's coming to
it shifted the whole world, everybody's world of ways of working, money, and there's this underlying, the job's not really changed, possibly. It might have done a little bit, but it's just the underlying what's going outside the world, because obviously stress is as a result of that anxiety of feeling out of control, you can't do stuff. And I think that's probably why we're getting all this burnout popping up everywhere, because of the last 4 years, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, at the beginning of last year, there was a research article, I think it might have been Gallup. They came out and said 46% of the UK workforce were feeling burnt out. This year, it's 76. And it's just been gradually increasing since 2020, because back in 2020, it was only, I think, 20-odd%, something like that. So we're seeing huge increases in burnout, because I would actually say workplaces have changed quite a lot, depending on the industry, right? So if you take, I mean, it depends on which industry you work in, you might be seeing some differences or not. But I think every industry has been hit in some form of a matter when it comes to this element. So businesses are run by human beings, and if human beings are stressed, it's going to change how they show up at work. So if you take a CEO who's really stressed out, regardless of how great they are at compartmentalizing, that will filter out into the business, and it will. And that's sort of the pressure we're seeing. It does have a trickle-down effect. And it's so insidious that it's sometimes hard to see, but that's something that I always talk about. I mean, I work with MDs and CEOs. I'm always like, your stress is so important to manage, not only because you're a human being and you deserve to not be stressed, but also the impact that it's having on the business and what the business is having an impact on you. So that's a massive piece there. And I think when we get to the sort of the stage 4 of burnout, where we're starting to see the physical health issues, it's something to really understand with the inflammation, and why, you know, we've all probably heard the stories where it's like, oh, so-and-so had a heart attack because they were so stressed out, or so-and-so had a stroke because they were so stressed out. Like, we've got all these sort of, oh, that'll happen to them, not me kind of element. The reason why that is happening is because of inflammation. Inflammation is at the root of all lifestyle illnesses, and that chronic stress is one of the biggest perpetrators of that. So that's just something to really understand. But then anxiety also kicks in as well at this stage. So, and that can be quite shocking, especially for the type A's, because at the end of the day, you've been in so control of everything that when anxiety kicks in, you feel so out of control. And this is when we start to see a really big breakdown on that physical health, that emotional well-being, and that mental fortitude as well. So it's really difficult to focus. You're probably getting some brain fog at this stage as well. Then we slip into stage 5, and this is the scariest part. This is where things really aren't great, which is people start to have apathy. Now, what happens at this stage is, because you've been so overwhelmed for such a prolonged period of time, looking at that stage 4, depending on how long you're in it for, and let's say your health is really diminished, you really don't have capacity to care. So it's not that you don't care. It's not that you are no longer motivated, you're no longer driven, you no longer want to see the business be successful. It's just you don't have the capacity to care. And that is really, really scary for a lot of people. And this is where people can kind of go, well, is it depression? Is it burnout? And sometimes it's difficult to see between the two, because apathy can come across like it is depression, and vice versa. So it's really being able to understand where that's come from. And I always say stress isn't a mental health issue, but it can create a lot of mental health issues. So that's something to really pay attention to.
That apathy, I mean, I've seen that in people, where you just see somebody who has the drive that they had has gone, no real interest, and it's quite sad to see, because you almost see the shell of a person that there was there before, because they're just not who they really are, because they've just gone, almost feels like.
It's I've personally burnt out, and I will say that was the scariest part for me, because I went from being so driven, so goal orientated, to being the best at what I did, to going, I just don't even care if I get out of bed today. Like, I don't care about answering that email. I could not care less what happened. And it's not that I didn't care. It's just my brain was like, you can't care because we don't have there's no space for you to care.
No.
And then sort of that's not a very big, it's a very small hop, skip and a jump to get to burnout. So when you reach complete burnout, your physical well-being is in tatters. So you're probably having, it could be vague health issues, but you're definitely having some kind of health issue. And that's going to look different to every single person. So I've had people that have had severe gut health issues, autoimmune diseases. I've had somebody just have really high blood pressure, all of like just little things that some big, some little. So there's something to just to pay attention to with that. Emotionally, you're probably fleeting between the anxiety and that apathy quite a lot, because they're kind of a part of the same coin. And then mentally you're really struggling. So I've had people come to me going, I've read an email, I can't even make sense of it. I can read it, but I can't make anything meaningful from that information. Same thing with conversations. And so that's the 6 stages, and they're the warning signs to really pay attention to.
So if we take somebody at stage, I think it was stage 3, when you notice behavioral changes, and whether it's yourself as a leader, if you're listening right now, or you notice that in your team, what's the best way of addressing that? Because obviously you don't want to assume that what's happening, but what would you advise a leader if they notice the team, there's some sort of changes going on in the behavior?
So first things first, if it's you, because it's always easier to work on yourself than it is to persuade other people. It's always the way of it. So if you've noticed and you're a leader and you going like, my behavioral changes, like I'm snappier than I used to be, whatever. The best thing to do is just start putting good habits in place. So making sure that you're no longer passive working, create some space between you and work so you can decompress, so you can make sure that you're not overworking. Make sure that the first thing I always tell people to do is get a good night's sleep. So start prioritizing your sleep. And trust me, once you get to the anxiety stage, it's really hard to get to sleep if you're anxious. So try not to get to stage 4. So prioritizing your sleep. Make sure that you are doing some kind of exercise. You don't have to go to the gym for an hour a day, even if you're just doing like a 20-minute walk or like a 15-minute HIIT. It doesn't matter. Just do something for your body. And make sure you're starting to eat right. Like there's some of the really simple things that you can do, because what you're doing is you're giving your body and your brain the energy to combat stress. And that's something that a lot of people forget, that stress takes a huge, and like it's a massive energy toll on the body and the brain. So give that back. So sleep, exercise, all that kind of stuff. Create boundaries between you and work. And then I would start really thinking about how you react to stress and understanding, is that limiting you or is that working for you? The dilemma is in that stage is if you're a type A, you're going to trick yourself into going, but I work really well under stress. Like I achieve a lot under stress, but it's not sustainable. So really thinking about asking yourself, is this sustainable? A lot of the time it's going to be a no. That's for you as a person. If you recognize somebody in your team is starting to show those behavioral, those behavioral changes, the first thing you want to do is have a conversation. You want them to understand, you want them to understand that you're here to help, that you recognize that they might be struggling. You don't want to attack the person, but what you want to do is gently go, hey, I've recognized a couple of little changes in you. I'm really worried about you. You want to focus on the behaviors, not the person. So that's just a massive one. Separate the human from the behavior. So focus on the behavior because people respond better to that. And then what you want to do is understand where that stress could be coming from. So you go, hey, I've recognized that, you're a bit frustrated and all that kind of stuff. What's going on? See if they open up. They might not open up, and that is just, in that situation, what you want to do is constantly touch base with them, make sure that they're doing okay. But also, if they're finding that stress is one of their, stress is one of the biggest workers. If work is one of their biggest stresses, helping them sort of balance that. Sometimes with people that are feeling burnt out, they prioritize 100% of everything. Helping them prioritize better can be really, really useful for them as well. If you notice that they're on their emails or Slack or any other messaging boards outside of core work hours, encourage them to disconnect when they're not physically having to be at work. And you might need to be the leader of that. So here's the thing is, because you're a leader, people are going to follow what you do. So if you're emailing people at 1 a.m. in the morning, they're going to think that they might have to do that, or they have to get back to you really quickly, all that kind of stuff. So if you want to send an email at 1 a.m. in the morning, please don't, for one. Second of all, schedule that email to go out later or hold off so you're not messaging sort of outside of those core hours, to make sure that you're creating good habits within the workplace. But you also want to make sure that you're encouraging that person to take care of their own well-being. I always say preventing burnout in the workplace is a dual approach. Your role as a leader is to create an environment where people can take care of their well-being. The hardest part is encouraging people then to take care of their own well-being, because it ends up having to be an individual approach as well.
Yeah, I think you touched on a very powerful thing, which is role modeling. I think as leaders, if you want to prevent and protect your people, you've got to role model that whole how you work, from in terms of boundaries, sending emails, work time, what you do outside of work, switching off, and almost share what you're doing as your habits, your practices. I think it's really important. What other responsibilities does a workplace have in helping protect their people? And what else can they do as an organization to help people prevent them from getting burnout?
So first things first, if you're an organization and you don't even know if your team is struggling with stress and burnout, do a pulse check. You definitely want to do a survey to make sure to see where people are at. Because here's the thing, if someone in your team is burnt out, it costs I'm just going to talk about cost for a second, because it is really important to understand. We've talked about the human element, but I think as a financial element, we have to understand that as well. For every single person that's burnt out in your organization, it costs £3,500 per £10,000 of salary. So to make that really, really simple, if someone is on £100,000 as a base salary, and I'm only doing this because it's simple math, it's going to cost you $35,000 every single year for one person. If you've got 10 people, that's going to be $350,000. So it has a massive toll on the workplace and the financial responsibility as an organization. So that's why you do have to take it really seriously. So going back to what I was saying, so do a pulse check, see where people are at, understand what's working and what's not working. I think the biggest dilemma that workplaces have right now is that there's so much information that may or may not work for them. So, the 4-day work week, flexible working, all these different types of well-being initiatives. I've seen so many companies trying to implement them, but they don't really know what outcome they're trying to change. So understand the outcome that you're trying to change and understand the metrics of what that looks like. Also, understand what your employees need to be able to take care of their own well-being. But your responsibility as an employer and as a company is to make sure you're creating an environment where people can work at their best, be their authentic selves, and be able to feel safe enough to let you know, hey, I'm not coping, or whatever it is. That's your responsibility. You can't force people to do the right thing with taking care of their well-being. But if you don't even create a space for them to even be able to do that, then you're not doing justice to your team as well. So really understand where your people are at and how they've gotten there. And that can be just asking questions, better understanding what's going on, and be really take acknowledgement and really take a step back and reflect what's going on. Has there been changes? How that's impacting the people in your team? Because it's so insidious. If you go back to 4 years ago, does your company look the same it did 4 years ago to it does today? Is the culture the same? Are people feeling the same? What's your turnover rate? All of these things, check in with all of those things to see what's going on.
Yeah, I think a pulse survey is really powerful, actually, to get an understanding right now how are people feeling. Those and anonymous ones are even better, so there's no sense of people can just say what they really feel. And I know organizations use pulse surveys all the time, and I think that's a good way of getting a sense. And I think as a leader, it's important to keep that dialogue open, have those conversations, look out for people in terms of if there's any changes. I think what you've just shared there, Katie, has been really sort of powerful, really insightful, and really helpful as well. I think some real sort of strategies there for people either experiencing or about to experience it, burnout. They can take some sort of action there as well. If people want to sort of get in touch with you and sort of connect with you, what's the best way of doing that?
So there's a few ways. So LinkedIn is the best. I'm definitely active on LinkedIn. So connect with me on LinkedIn. So it's just Katie Maycock. You just Google "get your shit together," I will pop up somewhere. So you can find me through that way. I also have a website that you can go to where there's a lot of blog posts. There's a lot of information going up. It's gystwellbeing.com. So that's www.gyst, so GYST, wellbeing.com. So you can head over there. I've also got another website, which is more for an individual approach. So if you're a company, go to Gist Wellbeing. If you're more of an individual and you're wanting some more support, you can definitely check out my other website, which is www.getyourshittogether.io.
Excellent. Well, thank you for coming on, Katie. Much appreciated.
Thank you for having me.